All right, let's rock and roll. Welcome to the feedback formula. Unlock the guest insights that drive loyalty, frequency, and profit. I hope you came here to learn because I came here to teach. But what we're going to try and do is not just change your business, but change your mind about your business and the way you see your business. Feedback isn't about feelings, it's about profit. It's the first big paradigm shift. And what I mean is, feedback is a strategic lever, it's data that we can use. So if we're able to look at it from a non emotional state, from a non reactive state, it then becomes a measurable path to profit. So why are you here? I would assume that if you're anything like me as a restaurateur, I'm only focused on one of two things: making more money or saving more money. If it can do both, I'm very interested. If it does one or the other, I'm somewhat interested. And if it does neither, I'm not interested at all. So this entire conversation is framed around the best way to get you as much money as is humanly possible. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to focus on increasing frequency, increasing customer retention, and then increasing profitability. And in my humble opinion, based on 20 years as a restaurateur, I think the key to all of those is feedback. And so there are three types of feedback. So the first is in-house feedback. It's what's happening right now within the four walls of your restaurant. And then there's one-to-one feedback, which is what happens in an honest, private way when it still matters an hour or two after the experience itself. And then public feedback, what gets said online. And the opportunity there is to use reviews as a tool for coaching and clarity and content that actually builds your brand. And once we layer these three systems, you start improving and your guests keep coming back. And I would like to ask a question for the record, and I should have said this at the beginning. This isn't a presentation because that's boring. This is a conversation. What would be super useful to me is if you utilize the chat to communicate with me directly. Active learning is more beneficial than passive learning. So when I ask questions, it informs the direction that this conversation goes because I want it to be as useful as is humanly possible for the folks that are on this call. So show of hands, let me know in the chat. How many of you have been blindsided by a slow week or a bad P&L when you thought it was a strong month? How many of you have lacked visibility when it matters most into your businesses? Same, definitely same. It's a struggle, right? And so what you figure out really quick is the biggest hurdle in our business, other than overwhelm, is visibility. And so like the goal today is to leverage feedback to get you more visibility, because if you don't have visibility, you don't have control. So the question is, are you suffering from a lack of data or feedback? I would argue no. I would say that we're drowning in feedback, but we're starved for insight. You're getting comments and reviews and DMs at the table on receipts from your team. But nobody ever trained us how to extract value from those things. And so I want to fix that. What I want to do is I want to show you how to install a system that transforms feedback into dollars. Let me know in the chat. How does that sound? Sweet. Let's keep going. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Josh Kopel. I'm a Michelin awarded restaurateur. I owned a dive bar in Hollywood for 11 years. My sophomore effort was a Michelin awarded fine dining restaurant. And then we spun that out into a bunch of fast casual concepts. I did well in Los Angeles, easily one of the most competitive dining markets in the world. And the reason I did is probably not because I'm the best restaurateur in the world. Will Guidara is. But because I'm one of the best restaurant marketers in the world. I see the world differently. I see our industry differently. And if you can see it the way I see it, I think it will massively scale your business. And that's really the goal today. Through my 20 years of building and scaling restaurants as a restaurateur, I created a system around it, the foundations of which we're going to go through in large part today. I like to increase profitability by simplifying operations, turning your teams and your communities into marketing engines for you, and making hospitality more systemized and not less human. And so those are the frameworks we're going to go through today. and why this matters. What I'm trying to do here is help you compress time. The best coaches in the world do nothing more than compress time. I would ask you in the chat, like, how much further would you be today if you knew 5 years ago all the lessons that you know today? That's coaching. That's what we're trying to accomplish with a workshop like this. What we're trying to do is give you the information that you would come up with on your own over time today so that we can improve today and tomorrow. So let's talk about the different layers of feedback and how they work. And again, this isn't something I read in a book. I didn't work for great people that taught me how to do this stuff. This is decades of trial and error on my own as a restaurateur, and then leveraging what I've learned in the systems that I've created through hundreds of restaurants globally. And the first layer is in-house feedback. This is what's happening within the four walls of your restaurant. And here's what I would argue. The best feedback never hits the internet. It's handled before it becomes a problem. And I would ask you, like, how do you do that most effectively? What worked for me was embracing the suck, because I would train my teams for curiosity and I would empower for action. I would argue that most of my restaurant experiences and most of the owners and operators that I know, they're waiting for guests to complain. But the best of us don't. We train our teams to look for signs of friction before they turn into problems. That is the job. I was recently on site with a fine dining concept, and I was trying to explain to them the difference between like service and hospitality. And Danny Meyer has a great quote about it, but the way that I would describe it to you is like service is meeting the needs and the expectations of our customers. But hospitality is anticipating problems before they become real issues. That's the job. And so we train our team not to deal with issues in real time, but to anticipate them. So if a plate comes back barely touched, we don't wait until the check drops to say something. If a guest's food hasn't arrived at the table, but everyone else is like halfway through their meal, we don't pretend not to notice. And if a hostess sees that someone is clearly irritated during the wait, she doesn't look away. She leans in and she tries to rectify the situation. So I would argue that most of our teams avoid these conversations for two reasons. Number one, they're afraid of conflict. And number two, they don't have the tools that they need to solve the problems in real time. We need to train our teams to lead with curiosity and then give them the tools to act. So these are the tools that I gave my team. What I think is we need to give them tools to engage. And so like we had quick and fast rules. We would say, if it wasn't right, don't defend it, just replace it. If the experience didn't land, if they didn't like it, in my concepts, you didn't pay for food or drink that you didn't like. So we would comp it and we would own that moment. And then again, like when do you alert a manager? How do you make your managers more alert? Here's what I found. I found that like if you treat your team like professionals, they will act in a professional manner. If you give them the tools to solve issues, they will solve those issues themselves. Like how crazy is it that like we still run companies where servers have to go get permission to comp a dessert for birthdays, or where like someone didn't like a dish, so we've got to get permission to comp that dish off. I think that if we give people more leeway and more trust, and I saw it in my own locations, that they'll act accordingly. And then that frees up the manager to act more like a leader and to act more like the host and the master of ceremonies that they need to be. I think we need to expect more from our managers as well. And so instead of saying, how was everything? Did you enjoy it? We dig deeper. You walk up to the table and you say, what did you enjoy most? And then the true function of a manager is not only to solicit that information, that feedback that is so incredibly important, but to ask other questions. Is there anything we could have done to make it better? You know, if you really enjoyed dinner, you should try our lunch service. You know, doing things like that prime people to not only have a better experience, to reflect on the experience that they just had, but it also primes them to come back. It makes us part of the conversation. It makes people feel seen. When you go to a restaurant and someone asks you, How was everything? You say, fine, because that's part of the dance that we do. But if you're genuinely curious, if you genuinely want the feedback, we've got to begin to solicit in a more authentic way. Let me know in the chat. Does that resonate with you? Do you trust your teams to do that and do that on an ongoing basis? And like we all eat out, right? So you know that like these are the experiences that you remember most. And so we just think, oh, well, if we had a better team, we would do it. What I have found for my most successful clients is that when they begin doing the things that they intend to do, when they become successful, they automatically become more successful. And look, Mike Thibodeau brings up a great point. He says, need to trust the team more, need to work on the script for them to follow. You don't have to script for your team, because what we do is we leverage other tools like pre-shifts, which I'll dig into in a minute, to co-create with them. So it comes from a more authentic place. Now, what's the lens through which we look at the feedback that we get? Here's what I'll tell you. Not all complaints are operational failures. And here's how you teach your team to tell the difference. Misfired food, like that's on us, we fix it, we learn from it, we try and do better. But if the food is made to spec and the guest didn't like it, that's more of an expectation issue, isn't it? Like I wouldn't change the recipe. I would change the description to make sure that people don't avoid that. Also, if it's completely foreign to the people that come in one of my restaurants, we did elevated Southern. So we had things like collard greens on the menu, and not everyone's had collard greens, sadly for them. But what I'll tell you is like one of the things we did, again, to lead with curiosity, is we help people make the right decisions. We help manage their expectations by asking things like, what do you eat at home? What do you enjoy eating? When you go to a restaurant, what type of restaurants do you go to? That way we can guide them towards things that they are most likely to like. So if we did it right and they didn't like it, that's preference. That's not a process problem. But either way, we're going to work to make it right because that's the standard. So the other thing I want to talk about is the other side of the coin. So we've talked about service recoveries, but like here's the secret for me and my clients: surprise and delight. How many of you are familiar with the concept? Let me know in the chat. So surprise and delight is like this big, beautiful life hack. It's this idea that we do something unexpected in an unexpected way. But for those of you that understand it and those of you that do it, and I would ask, like, what do you do? A lot of people would say like, oh, we give a free dessert for a birthday. But that's not surprise and delight. That's just delight, right? It's not a surprise because it's their birthday. And if they didn't get something, they would be disappointed. Or 2 glasses of champagne for an anniversary, right? Like that's a popular one. But again, like that's delight. That's not surprise and delight. The surprise is what creates the word of mouth. The surprise is what builds your brand. So I'll give you an example of what it looks like. So in my fine dining restaurant, you would come in for your anniversary, and we would give you a handwritten note, which many people do, signed by the whole staff, which says happy anniversary. Me or a member of my leadership team would then walk up with 2 glasses of champagne. And we would give you the champagne. We would congratulate you on not getting divorced in a country where the divorce rate is roughly 50%. And that wasn't what was special. What was special was then we would say, wait, do you hear that? And playing through the speakers in my restaurant was the song that you danced to at your wedding. That's surprise and delight. A year from now, where do you think they're going to host their anniversary? 2 years from now, do you think they're going to remember what they ate or the quality of the service? No, but they'll remember that song. A week after they dine with us, when people ask how their anniversary was, what do you think they're going to bring up? And let me know in the chat, how much do you think that cost? It cost absolutely nothing. It's time, it's effort, it's intention. And so we are all so busy dealing with what is urgent and what is important and all of these day-to-day things. But like, who builds the word of mouth in our restaurants. We do. And the way that we do it is by orchestrating and systematizing all of these things that work. How am I doing on time? Okay, I'm doing well on time. Rena, I'm going to give you one more example because you asked for it. So, in my fine dining restaurant, we did a ton of birthday parties. I'm sure a bunch of you do a ton of birthday parties. And one of the questions that you ask when you book birthday parties is, are you bringing a cake? Right? So if they're not bringing a cake, what's the expectation? They're like, we're going to supply the birthday person with a dessert with like a candle in it. But like, what do you do? Because there are like 14 people at the table. So do you just comp like a dessert for them? Do you do it for the whole table? What does it look like? Right? Here's the compromise we made and built it into surprise and delight. I created a strategic partnership with a local bakery in downtown Los Angeles who offered me a wholesale rate on birthday cakes. And so I would spend $50 wholesale on a birthday cake. Do you know what a $50 wholesale birthday cake looks like? Looks like a $150 cake. Looks like a $200 cake. It was absolutely amazing. So if you can imagine a scenario, Rena, where you and your friends come, you sit in my restaurant, you've had a wonderful meal. And at the beginning of it, I said, you know what? Don't even worry about dessert. It's your birthday, dessert's on the house. And I didn't bring you out a tiny dessert with a candle in it. I didn't bring it out for everybody. I brought you out arguably one of the nicest birthday cakes you have ever received in your entire life with your name on it that the whole party gets to share. What did I do there? Well, I just guarantee that like you're going to have your birthday party with me forever. But think about the other people at the table. I don't even need to do that every time. People just want to support businesses that are willing to go that far. And so that's how we create word of mouth. Surprise and delight is something that you build into your system. And here's what I would recommend. I would recommend systematizing it. What is something that your leaders can do? And what is that budget attached? What is something your line level employees can do and attach a budget? And I'll give you a few guidelines there that I think will be useful. So the first is this isn't expensive and we need to stop bleeding comps. I think most restaurants bleed out their comps on forgettable moments, a drink here, a dessert there. And no one notices, no one really remembers. And most of the time we're just encouraging behavior that's already going to happen no matter what. You've never gone back to a restaurant. Oh, well, you know, they comp that dessert. So like, we've got to go back there. It doesn't matter. And so what I would say is we eliminate all comps, restructure them, stacking the value into one unforgettable moment. That if it's the right person and it's the right moment and it's the right story, you comp the whole meal. Let's go back to Mike Thibodeau's anniversary. It's him and his wife, and they're sitting there, and we did the champagne, and then we did the music, and it was this amazing experience. Then in the end of it, I say, you know what? Dinner's on me tonight. Enjoy it. I would be willing to bet dollars to donut my comps were lower than anyone else's in this chat. It was just how we chose to spend it. Right? And so that's the thing. We just need to get more intelligent. So what I did for my line level employees was I gave them a budget of $100, but they had to spend it on one party, on one couple, on one person. And I gave them a framework around how to do it. And this was it. It comes down to the ones and tens. So who do we comp? We comp the people that are having the worst day of their lives or the best day of their lives. That's really it. I took Mike and his wife and I took it from a 10 to what is that? Like an 11 teen. It's a whole new number. Like that was the most unforgettable dining experience of their entire life. They're with me for life. They're going to tell everyone how amazing I am. But on the other side of that, there are people that are going to come into your restaurant tonight. They're going to sit at your bar. They're going to eat by themselves and they're having a hard day. And so then it's not about getting them to an 11. It's taking someone from a 1 to a 5. And they'll remember you forever for that kindness. And it's not because you gave them a free drink or you gave them a dessert. It's that you gave them a meal. You gave them the whole thing, the whole experience. You know, the root of the word restaurant is to restore. And that is what we do when we use surprise and delight and we use comp strategically to create unforgettable moments. Let me know in the chat. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you? Sweet. Let's keep going. All right. So how do we know if it's working? Pre-shift. Pre-shift is the debrief. You don't need a tracker for this. You need a routine. And every pre-shift should include what issues came up yesterday, what the team did about it. Was it a real failure, or did they just not like what we do for a living? Surprise and delight, what worked, what didn't, what's worth repeating. And then again, to Mike's point, like, then we script it. Well, what did you say? How did you say it? And then we all try, because what we find is language is a common thread. So if we were able to use the common language and these common experiences, because we're all kind of like each other, right? We build that muscle. We're able to spot patterns worth solving. One of the things I tell my clients all the time is we're not here to solve problems. We're here to solve patterns. And this is where you detect those patterns. And this is also how your team becomes a room of operators and not just servers or hosts or bussers, because they have ownership over the outcome. So here's what I want you to do. Spot the friction early, fix it fast by giving your team the tools they need, and debrief daily. Can I get a herd in the chat? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Layer 2, one-to-one feedback. This is a relatively new thing for our industry, but it is easily the most exciting kind of feedback there is. You can't fix what you don't hear. And most restaurants rely on what guests say in-house or online. But by the time the information goes public, like, we've already lost the chance to fix the experience or retain the guest. And so the real win, in my opinion, is one-to-one feedback. And there's a sweet spot for it, right? It's private, post-visit, but it's still honest, because it's after the guest has left, but they're no longer trying to be polite, but it's before they've gone public. And this is where the truth lives. And the good news is we can systemize. So here's why it matters, and why it's a different type of information. Guests are more candid after the check drops. This isn't about collecting compliments. It's about creating clarity. You're going to spot issues that you would otherwise miss. A lot of times this feedback is rooted in operational issues. The table was wobbly. The bathroom was dirty. And we can also save guests before they churn. It's going to cover blind spots that impact loyalty, which is super important. And it's going to impact performance across the board. To me, this is the most actionable data we have to work off of post-meal. And we need so much more than a let us know how we did. You need a system that takes that feedback, makes it easy to give, immediate to receive, and really simple for you and your teams to act on. And there are 4 facets to this, 4 filters that we're going to use to qualify this feedback. So the first is that it's timely. It needs to come within a couple of hours of the visit, because people forget fast. Number 2, that it's contextual, that it's tied to the location, the time, the server, and the team on duty. Third, that it's specific, that it tells you what went well and what missed the mark. And the fourth is that it's actionable, that it lets you know exactly what to do next. That is the bar for this feedback. And so this is how we solicit the feedback. Step 1 is we've got to get their contact information, and we've got to do it during the visit, which is easier said than done, but is critical to this process. So it could be something as simple as, we'd love to follow up with a little thank you. What's the best number to reach you or email you? Number 2, we've got to follow up within a couple of hours, because most guests are going to forget the details after a few hours. And then the third step in this is to ask the right questions. For those of you that know, I host the Full Comp podcast. I've done it for 5 years. And I've had over 500 interviews. And what I can tell you is, I probably, as an expert in asking questions, is the quality of the questions we ask are ultimately going to give us the information that we need to act. So we want to open the door to clarity and surface insights that we wouldn't have been able to guess or figure out on our own. And so Yelp for Restaurants, who's putting on this amazing workshop was kind enough to provide us with their flow that they use. And this has been tested and iterated over time. This is the cleanest, most simple version of this conversation. And it starts with having them rate their overall dining experience on a scale from 1 to 5. Then it's about how satisfied they were with the experience of getting in there through wait lists or reservation software. Then it's about rating the overall experience using different facets, right? All of the different aspects of the experience. And then it's about food and beverage, right? And the reason that experience comes before food and beverage is because when it goes the other way, they get a little too tactical. And again, the smiley faces are great because it gives them the opportunity to be candid and honest with you without writing too much. Then this is super important, guys. This is, it's called an NPS, Net Promoter Score. How likely are they to recommend your restaurant to a friend? This says everything you need to know because our industry is built on referrals and word of mouth. So even if they had a good experience, is it good enough to share with other people? And the last part of this is there any other feedback? Sometimes people are kind enough to give us more context, and this is the opportunity to do so. And then we need to take that data, just like we talked about at the beginning, and we've got to interpret it like an operator. Is it a one-off complaint? If it was, we can handle it in real time, but we don't need to overreact. But is there a repeated theme? Is there a pattern? Because if there is, like, we would bring that to the pre-shift. Is there praise for the staff in there? Kelly gave us an amazing experience. She recommended a bunch of things we wouldn't have selected, but it was absolutely amazing. I would recommend that you share that information publicly with your team, but then reward that individual privately. If there's a low score with no comment, I would be all over that because there's more there under the surface. And then we can use that data to coach our team and refine our menu and adjust our flow to rebuild our recovery system. Because we're not collecting this for fun. Lord knows we get so much data thrown at us. We're collecting it with the intention of driving better outcomes. Let me know in the chat. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you? Do you see how that's a different type of feedback than the four walls or what we see online? I'll hydrate. Sweet. Okay. So if you want to do it on your own, those are the tools to do it on your own. This workshop is recorded, so you'll be able to get the information again and again. But if you don't want to do it and you don't want to become a software developer and engineer, I would strongly recommend piloting the guest experience survey by Yelp. You don't have to worry about capturing the information because it does it automatically during the reservation and waitlist booking, and it follows up immediately. And then you get like amazing data in a dashboard that you're able to interpret in real time and use to galvanize your team. Why does it work? It's got a sky-high response rate. It does drive return visits, and it's frictionless for you and your team to use. Any questions on that before we begin layer 3? Let me know in the chat. Sweet. So layer 3, public feedback. When I do these webinars, online trainings, workshops, when I post to social media, and I talk about reviews as marketing gold, this is the framework that I'm going to share with you that I am talking about specifically. I think that reviews are like the best thing in the world, not only because it gives us feedback, but it gives us the opportunity to supply feedback to that feedback. It's that inception thing, and it works beautifully. But it starts with one core belief that I have that we should share. And that's that every review is 100% true to the person that wrote it. Clutch your pearls. If you go back and you look at my restaurant's reviews, they weren't all positive, right? And some weren't even true. But what I will tell you is this: they were 100% true to the person that wrote it, to the person that took the time. Because I'm not a big online review writer, but someone took time out of their day based on the experience that they had to give me positive or negative feedback. And that is a personality type, and that is someone worth listening to. And the reason is this: you stay in this industry long enough and you figure out something really quick. This is an expectations game. Every review, good or bad, is a reflection of whether we have met or missed expectations. And so I believe that most negative reviews aren't personal. Even if they feel personal, even if it's about food or service. What I think they're about is disappointment. I don't think that anyone goes to our restaurants to have a bad time. I think that they had an expectation and we failed to meet that expectation. And so I want to make sure that we're speaking to that failure to meet that expectation in the reviews, because more often than not, I am sorry. I am sad. Like, I didn't open these restaurants to make people angry. I opened these restaurants to make people happy. And so if there's disappointment, I'm not going to fight it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and close the gap. And so here's my process. And this process doesn't just diffuse the situation. It begins to market my restaurant to the next 100 people that are going to read that review. It starts by acknowledging the situation. Hey, Rena, I am so sorry that you didn't like the 36-hour beef rib. And then I get into the validating it. Like, this is a specialty dish that takes us days to prepare, blah, blah, blah. But I understand that it might not be for everyone. And then I reiterate my mission. Our mission here at Pru and Proper is to serve Southern classics reimagined. And then our commitment. And our commitment is to make sure that we exceed the expectations of everybody that walks through the door. And the last part. So if we miss the mark, I'd like to invite you back. I'd like for you to come in and give me the opportunity personally to show you what I think we're truly capable of. So why would I do that? And why would I do that at scale? I would do it because I'm not replying to the guest. I'm speaking to everyone that's reading the review. This is how we turn it into marketing gold. I do the same exact thing with the positive reviews. Hey, Rena, I'm so glad you had an absolutely amazing time at my restaurant and that you love the beef rib. It takes us 3 days to prepare that dish with painstaking effort with a kitchen that gets there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Our mission is to take Southern classics and reimagine them in a way that serves the Los Angeles community. And our commitment is to make sure that everyone that comes here has the same experience that you do. Would love for you to let us know the next time you're in town or the next time you'd love to come by. I'd love to stop by the table and say hello. Let me know in the chat, how many of you guys are doing anything like that now? It's transformative. It's absolutely transformative. And the reason it is when you go into the back end of your Yelp for Business account, or you're going into the back end of your Google listing or your TripAdvisor, what you're going to see is that all of you are getting collectively thousands of hits per month. So what do they see? I want them to see my words. I want them to hear my mission. I want them to see my commitment. I want them to know that I am here to serve them. And also, when you look at my responses compared to everyone else's, it shows that I'm putting forth more effort in a more genuine way. And so let's talk about reviews as a core strategy. How do we use them? How do we distill out that information? For me, I track them weekly, and then I try and distill it out monthly. What complaints are recurring? What compliments are people repeating? Are our team, our product, our brand promise aligned to the guest experience? Because a lot of this comes down to how we describe the restaurant online needs to line up with the experience that they have when they come in. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, well, I'm sure that it does. But when did you originally write that? Are you guys updating that copy and those expectations on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, to make sure that it's always lining up with what you're doing and what you want to be known for? This is how we separate the noise from the signals. One angry review is forgettable, but if 5 reviews say that the food took too long, I'm going to go talk to the expo about it. And I would encourage you to do the same. Let me know in the chat, how many of you are all in on ChatGPT these days? How many of you are using AI in your businesses on a regular basis? So something that is absolutely transformative is ask ChatGPT to evaluate your online reviews. Ask for it to determine your strengths, your weaknesses, and common themes. And then use that in your training, in your marketing. I'm going to give you guys an old school marketing hack that works 100% of the time. If you use the language that your best customers use to describe you in your marketing, it will resonate with folks just like them. It's a magic trick. So the way that they would describe you, the things that they love most about you, that is the fodder that we put on social media, that we use when we craft our descriptions, that we use when we redraft our website quarterly, which we should be doing. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, Seth Godin has this great quote. He says, like, people like us do these things. People like us do these things. So people that go to Orange Theory 5 times a week, they eat right. You know, and so if you can figure out what these common themes are, we're able to pull on those common threads to amplify your marketing. Again, that is why reviews are marketing gold. And the last thing I'll say is this, and we've all been there. We're like on Monday morning, you're checking the reviews from a busy weekend and like you're tense because you don't really know what it's going to look like. Public feedback is not your enemy. It's a mirror. And so if we engage with it consistently, tactfully, and through a strategy, not with ego, we win twice because we will retain more guests and we will earn trust from new ones that are watching how we show up on a monthly basis. This is your chance to turn reviews into revenue. Let me know in the chat. Does that make sense? This is our big opportunity, guys. Because if we can do this, it creates a paradigm shift in our business. Before continuing, there's one big idea I want to share with you. If I'm a good marketer, which may be up for debate, it's because I learned to value data and not to place a personal value on the data, but just to evaluate the data and let it guide me in the right direction. As a marketer, what you tend to do is you just want data. You just want responses. It doesn't matter if the promotion worked or not. It just matters what you can learn from the promotion as you move on to the next one. And so I would encourage you that as you're doing all of these things, that you iterate constantly, and that it's more about the collection of the feedback, understanding that all feedback is valuable, and that we're then able to iterate quickly as a result. And to that point, let's talk about how to operationalize all of this information. So if we've done everything that we talked about doing, and maybe you work that quick, you've trained your team how to spot in-house friction. We've built a system to quickly collect post-visit feedback, and we've learned how to engage publicly without ego to the benefit of not only our business, but everyone else that's going to read those reviews. And for the other reviews, positive and negative, people feel seen. They feel special. So now we're going to operationalize it. And here's the next big idea. Feedback, insight is only useful if it changes something. Because insight without action is just data. And our job is to take what we're learning and build it into the heartbeat of the business. And so this is what your daily, weekly, monthly rhythm should look like. So it starts with daily. We need to talk it out in pre-shift. Making micro adjustments, handling it in the moment, talking about it in pre-shift, and reinforcing these ideas. Weekly, we're looking to identify patterns, start looking at trends, what's recurring, compliments, service issues, reasons for comps and discounts, surprise and delight. And third, monthly, we're going to adjust the systems and the structures. So we're going to zoom out. We're going to look at the process, the people, the policy, and we're going to tie that back into training, menu updates, and shift structures. And so when you ask, how do I prioritize all of this information? What I would recommend is that we work to get really, really close to the money. So will it increase your revenue? Will it scale your per customer average spend? Will it reduce your expenses, your wasted food, your misfires, your comps? Like, what I am looking for is to make sure that everything that we do is tied to the bleeding neck issue in your business, which for all of you is making more money and saving more money, right? So let's talk about money and the financial impacts around it. Retention is cheaper than acquisition, right? Frequency is cheaper than advertising, and every one of you wants more guests. But the truth is that most restaurants don't need more new customers. They need more return visits. I would ask you in the chat, what happens to your business if everyone that comes in once a month comes in twice a month? If everyone that comes in infrequently comes in once a month, what happens to your business? You're rich. You are blindly wealthy. It is an amazing place to be. And so understand that feedback isn't just a hospitality tool to make it a more pleasant experience for your guests. It's a growth engine. And so let's do some quick math together, shall we? So let's say that your average, and I'm going to go with round numbers because public math is very uncomfortable for me. Let's say that your average guest spends $30. And so they come quarterly. But if we can turn one casual visitor into a monthly regular, then the annual value of that customer is now $360 a year in revenue per guest. Now imagine we do that with 10 guests. It's an extra $3,600 a year. But you guys are seeing thousands of customers per year, right? So imagine if we do it with 100 guests. That's $36,000 a year without absorbing the cost of new customer acquisition. Retention doesn't just feel good, it pays better. And speed is incredibly important. The faster you follow up with a guest, the more likely you are to retain them after a bad experience, surprise them after a great one, to stay top of mind before they decide to try somewhere else. And again, like that's why things like the guest experience survey send that feedback within 2 hours of the visit, because memory fades and emotion cools, and then that opportunity disappears. So as it relates to the second layer of feedback, you must act quickly. Because we're all leaking power. We're all leaking visibility. And ultimately what ends up happening is without this visibility, we're bleeding reputation, we're bleeding revenue, and we're bleeding repeat business. And I can't tell you how many years passed before I realized it. And then it's too late to go recoup those dollars. And so I want you to start this week. And I don't want you to wait until you get all of your systems dialed. We're going to work like marketers. We're just going to move quickly, start dirty, and get this done. So here's what I would love for you to do this week. Number one, give your team the tools to fix issues in real time. Number two, add recovery and surprise and delight to your pre-shift. Let's start having the conversation. Don't wait until it's fully baked. Let's ideate with your team. Then they'll have a greater sense of ownership over not only the outcome, but the process as well. I want you to touch base with your guests after their meal, but before the review, because I am telling you now, the quality of that feedback is not to be believed. It is almost always operational in nature, and it is stuff that is never going to hit the online review, but it's stuff you could fix in a minute. And then I want you to turn those reviews into marketing gold. I want you to live on your online review sites. I want you replying to everyone, understanding that it isn't just an investment in retaining that guest, is an investment in acquiring new guests as well. And then I want you to track the wins and the losses and the surprises, because what I found is like what we track gets improved. And so we have a tendency to always focus on what's wrong, but when you're tracking the wins and the surprises as well as the losses, we're able to 10x what's working. I think the momentum is a really, really powerful thing. And so most of my clients hire me to fix problems in their business, and that's rarely where I focus. Where I focus is what's working in your business. Because if we simply 10x the efforts into what is working in your business, we will get 100x the results because that momentum is real. It is a very powerful thing. And I understand that it's a grind. And I understand that like every single day, you're just trying to get it done. And look, I have been to the top of the mountain across multiple tiers of dining in the best days. Were still incredibly difficult. But what made it worthwhile was tracking my progress, discussing the wins openly, discussing the surprises, and really working to not only make my team's day, but make my patrons' day through empowering my team to create magical moments that rarely cost me a penny. So let's talk high level about the ideologies that we discussed today, shall we? This thing wasn't about reviews. It's about reputation. And we're not really talking about data either. We're talking about the decisions that you need to make in your business. And so it's less about feedback and it's more about follow through because you've already built something that's worth sharing. Most of you, and I didn't do a ton of online research, but most of you have been in market long enough that you do not have a product market fit issue. The only thing that you're struggling with is awareness and frequency. And so I just want to make sure that every guest leaves your restaurant with a story worth sharing. And so this is what we learned today. We learned how to collect feedback that actually matters, how to respond like a pro, both publicly and privately, how to systemize retention and guest satisfaction, and how to turn insights into action and action into a higher return on investment. And so I've got two things for you to do next. So number one is if you're interested in trying the guest experience survey that we ran through in this training, Yelp will give it to you for 60 days for free. You'll simply email restaurants@yelp.com requesting it, and they will take care of that for you. And if you like me, if you think I'm remotely interesting or smart, or you learned anything from this, in the month of June, I'm hosting a 5-day restaurant profitability masterclass where I'm going to run you through the program that I run my clients through for 1 hour a day for 5 days so that you can scale your net profit to 15% or more. It's just like this. It is super tactical. You're going to get worksheets and trainings, the whole 9 yards, and it's completely free. As a result, and because it is so bespoke, we have a limited number of spots available. So if you're interested, hop on joshkopel.com and knock that out. And if you have any questions about this, be sure to reply back to any one of the reminders that you got for this event. They will get the information to me. Neil asks, how do we get the recording? The Yelp team will be sending that out after the fact. And we'll rock and roll from there. There is going to be a recording coming out. They will get you in direct contact with me as needed. And the last thing I'll say is this. I did this for 20 years and it was hard every inch of the way, and success didn't really look or feel like the way that I thought it would. And so I understand how valuable your time is, how valuable your attention is. And I just want to let you know from the bottom of my heart that I appreciate you showing up. Like, this is a small investment in me, but it is a much bigger investment in yourself. There's this great book by Dan Sullivan called Who, Not How. And in the book, like, the ideology that he advocates for is that, we should stop trying to figure out things on our own as leaders, and we should simply look to those people that could possibly provide us with the solutions that we need. That was the big aha in my career. That was the big paradigm shift. So if you got value from this, we are hosting these monthly on different topics every single month. I would encourage you to sign up for all of them. Like you saw in this, I'm going to bring my absolute best to it. There are a variety of tools out there for you. I would encourage you to keep looking because it makes for a better business for you and it makes for a better industry for all of us. I hope you guys have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.